Welcome to Love, Money, and the Law. The subject is cohabitation. Shall we get married or do we live together? My guest is Tobie Oidtmann, a psychotherapist in Houston, Texas. And we are going to explore all the aspects of cohabitation in just a few short minutes, right?
Right.
The stats now are showing that about 60 or 70% of couples live together before they get married.
Right.
And I believe also the stats reflect that that's not necessarily a good thing for a marriage.
The original data showed, that's around 2012, that by living together, cohabiting first, there was a 50% higher rate of divorce in the marriage.
Why do you think that is?
Well, they adjusted it a bit in 2014, and at that point they said some of it might have had to do with differences in personalities, difference in family cultures. There were other things. How many other relationships had they had before in terms of living with someone? There'd be a number of other factors that might fade, but the results are still pretty much the same. With the new bit of information that if the cohabiting relationship lasts at least 7 years, it seems that then the chance of divorce decreases from 50%. It may still be higher, but it's not at the 50% rate that it was earlier.
So in other words, if you live together at least 7 years and then get married, there's a pretty good success of staying married.
Well, there's a lower chance of divorce. The longer you live together, the longer you cohabit, the diminished chances there are of divorce. However, most cohabiting relationships last approximately on average 22 months.
Really?
Many of them less than a year. So there's a big gap between 22 months and 7, 8, 9, and 10 years. The norm is not a long-term cohabiting relationship. Generally, other factors intervene and the relationship dissolves.
So if couples are moving in together to sort of try it out, what are some of the things that you understand are the reasons for a breakup in the relationship versus, again, most marriages, I believe, last longer than a year, even though they might end in divorce. But cohabitation does not provide the same security. Or why do you think, is the reason for that? Do you know?
I think there's several reasons. Number one, it's not as committed. You've already got a way out, thus the name cohabitation. So many people will say, "Oh, I'll just try this out and see if it works," or I'm here for a year and maybe I'm going to go somewhere else. And so it's not that this is the rest of my life kind of a commitment. If couples that are cohabiting do become engaged and marry, they also, after the engagement, have lower possibility of divorce. So the formalization of the commitment, beginning with an engagement and then moving into a formal marriage ceremony, does seem to make a difference.
So there's a different energy around getting married versus cohabitating, right? Still, today. I mean, we could say that's the case years ago because we had a much more traditional sort of society where cohabitation was not very well accepted, frankly. And now, young couples particularly move in together. They have children together. Blended families are moving in together. I mean, what do you see, if anything at all, as a result of that? And 4 kids, for example, that grow up in a household where the parents are not married.
It is at some cost to the children and maybe to a degree to the parents, in that although it is becoming a more accepted way of shaping a family, it is very difficult on the children. The data shows that the children have many more issues later on. It could be depression, poor performance in school, oppositional defiant behavior, anxiety, any number of behavioral health, mental health issues.
So there's actually a connection between cohabitating parents and the issues that you just mentioned. There's some way that they've measured
Well, there's
that
more than
for-
that. Yes, there's
Okay.
data.
Okay.
And the greater part is that they're not as well supported by the community or their family. Although the couple may choose to make this choice, the parents, the grandparents, extended family members, certain many religions, schools, community organizations do not readily accept that at this point in time, and the children bear the brunt. And because they're left out, set aside, or in any other way denigrated, they end up with certain emotional issues. Likewise, the women typically end up with higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety as well under those circumstances.
Is that because a lot of these relationships don't work out, and maybe there is a child born during
Generally,
the
during the
cohabitation?
first year, a lot of times, 30-some percent, 37, 38% during the first year.
Wow, that's very high, very
Yes.
high. And then if the relationship doesn't work out, then boom, there you are. You have
You've got a child,
a
and
child in the middle and no family support to speak of.
right. Yes, it's a difficult choice.
So are there any, I mean, can you say anything positive from a psychotherapy standpoint with respect to a cohabitation situation versus a marriage? I mean, if
I think you have to look at several things. One is their family of origin patterning. That means the family they grew up in. What were those family relationships like? What was that culture like? What were the dynamics like? That works towards imprinting and expectations in any sort of a close relationship. So that how many relationships have they had prior to this relationship? That can make a difference as well. Are they someone that goes from relationship to relationship to relationship? That might mean that there is some issue that has yet to be resolved, and rather than resolving the issue, they simply move from relationship to relationship to relationship. So there are those factors. The couples, I think, that do better cohabiting that I see, they're coming in and they may be cohabiting, they may be simply saying we're dedicated to one another, and they work on their issues. They work on their issues with me, whether it's it could be anything: finances, religion, expectations, life goals, whatever it is, and they work through it. And then when they move into that next step, assuming that's marriage, they've already done the hard stuff before they've worked in session before they've actually moved into the marriage itself. So that can be helpful. Also, getting clarity in counseling therapy: is this someone that's all I think they are? Because
Very good
sometimes
point.
we're very young and we have the chemistry, and there's no question, it's there, and it's reassuring, it's loving, it makes you feel as if you're an adult, you're into this path. But maybe it's wise to look a step behind and say, okay, what are their family traditions? What are the things that are going to affect us? And even better yet, where are they in their life? In other words, marrying or committing or cohabiting right out of high school, right out of college, those are artificial environments. You've not really been out in the world long enough to be tested and learn what this person or that person is like under pressure when it really gets rough. So entering some sort of a counseling or therapeutic environment can sometimes work through some of that, looking at each other's history, knowing about family of origin influences, that can make a difference. But someone that says, I want to be with this person because I'll feel safe and I'll be taken care of, you have to look a little more at that. Or, I want to do this because I'm working hard and I want to come home and I want to have a meal and I want to have my clothes done and I want a family. I don't even necessarily care about the person as long as I want the family. Those things do not bode particularly well. It's becoming more common, but and the outcome's a little better, but it's still not all that it is with a traditional engagement and marriage. The marriage
Not
is
the
saying,
same.
this is the rest of my life. Cohabitation says, let's give it a shot.
let's try.
And
That's
there's a
right.
big difference. So you work harder through something if it's going to be with you the rest of your life than you will with an issue. Well, if I get tired, I'm just out of here and that's it.
So let's talk about the senior community for a few minutes, because this is also a new trend for those over 60.
I think what gets thrown into the mix is wisdom that comes from life. And that's a big factor as we move into that. Yes, they're the pragmatics. There's benefits, life insurance, whatever, and do I lose that? For some people, a marriage is a commitment of heart, mind, body, and soul, and they don't want to even consider cohabiting. They want that. That's important. That's their value, and that's to be appreciated. With the more experienced older individuals, they are more, to a degree, more open-minded with one another in the community because they understand the dollars and cents. They're on a limited income. They've got to watch about whatever it is. They understand that. So they accept that in one another. But in a cohabitation as opposed to a marriage at that point, you can get resentments. And you try to divide everything up, but I have had people say it doesn't always seem like it's fair in terms of who pays for this or who does what, or how do we spend our free time, or what do we do socially. I mean, there are some issues.
In some ways, things don't change.
It's not very different in that way.
From your
Exactly.
20s to your 60s.
Yeah, it's different because you've spent a lifetime, and at that point you're making choices that are based on your life experiences and where you are in life, as opposed to when you're younger and you're thinking, I'm young, I'm vibrant, alive, I can live forever, I can do this, I can do that, I'm good, or so I can cohabit till I find the right person. Once you have a committed enough relationship that engagement is involved,
So
the likelihood of divorce diminishes, right?
Okay.
It doesn't go away completely, but it significantly diminishes. If it's simply cohabitation, we'll see how it works, we'll see how it feels. We'll try it out, whatever words are used. Generally, the underlying motivations are a little bit different. But there's not the commitment, we're going to make this work no matter what.
Right.
It's, let's see if it works. Not the commitment to make it work, but let's see if it works. And if it doesn't fit, if it's a shoe, like a shoe that doesn't,
Big difference.
Exactly.
Do you think there is a difference between males or females, or a different perspective with respect to living together versus getting married?
The data shows that more typically the female that enters cohabitation is anticipating it as the first step toward marriage. Whether they say it or not, that's the way they're going in. Now they'll say, I may need to think about it, I'm not so sure they have this habit or that habit, but in the back of the mind, that's really what they're thinking. And I believe a lot of males today don't necessarily see it that way. They're cohabiting, they care, but they're not so sure that it's going to go forward. It is more of a trial run for them than it is for the female.
I still have yet to understand why there's such a gender difference there with respect to living together.
Could be a lot of things. It could be hormones. Really, to be very basic, women estrogen, right? And here's an interesting fact. Women today are entering and graduating college in higher numbers than they have for years. I think it's in the 67, 69% or something like that. However, males are entering college in lower numbers, and they're graduating in lower numbers. They're down in the 40% now.
Really?
So
goodness.
there is this data that's showing
It's a shift.
that the 21-year-old males of 20 years ago are now 31 or 41. They're maturing or ready to assume the mantle of responsibility and accountability later than, but they may not have gone through what their fathers or grandfathers went through.
So there's actually two sort of undercurrents here. One is psychology, one is sociology. With respect to, okay, how does this feel to the person, and then there's the outside world. I mean, how are we socializing today versus 20 or 30 years ago? So how do we reconcile these two? Because I don't believe human nature changes. Our society does. Sometimes we look a little different because of perhaps economic reasons.
I think it's a challenging time because the way our society is moving today, males and females generally have an extended period of education. And in the case of a female, she may be fully adult and under other circumstances might be ready to start a family or a home or a household, but she's going through college and then she wants to build her career. So it then impacts that whole choice around cohabitation. In other words, I find someone, I really care about him, but I've got to do A, B, and C to start my career, to do what else. So there are other, and for the males as well. So there are other intervening variables. And there's the psychology and what's involved with maybe choices and what you feel. There's also the world as it is today. And I think that it's not been resolved. I think that's why more people are cohabitating. They're living together, but for different reasons now. And maybe they're thinking about it a bit differently than they used to. I still, the preponderance of the data still says a committed engagement, traditional engagement, marriage is the one that is less likely, has lower incidence of divorce. So that is definitely a thing. But if you've got two career-driven people trying to build in the first 10 years what they're going to do in the next 20 years, it makes a difference.
It does. And that I think that is probably more the direction that we're heading because, both genders are very independent now. And again, women did not have the same opportunities that we do now, 50 years ago. And with the advent of no-fault divorce, it started in the late 60s and has swept the country ever since. It used to be that, those traditional roles for women were a matter of necessity, and it was hard to break a marriage, to exit a marriage unless you had a basis for fault. That's not the case anymore. So, socially, it has called for, it's demanded a change for women to become more financially independent, and there's great benefits with that too for our independence. You don't have to stay in a marriage for financial reasons if you don't want to now, and I think that's a very different mindset today than it was, like I said, back as early as the 60s. So, with that has come a whole different set of lifestyle to be examined. And I just think if we're still looking at, from a psychological standpoint, that the feeling that's inside a relationship of marriage versus cohabitation, that security, that sense of this is a part of, our families are coming together. We'll consider having children under these circumstances. The religious institutions certainly support that. So in a way, even though it's a trend, there's still sort of, young couples particularly are still living outside the norm to some degree, socially, even though it has become more acceptable. Would you agree with that? Or?
I agree, and I would say that is why the cohabitation agreements are so important. There is an answer for what's happening today. You can experience a connection with someone that you love and care about. You can live together, but because of society and its changes, the answer is to protect each person through an agreement. This is different. The reason for cohabiting in this set of circumstances, I feel, is different than cohabiting just because I want to try out a marriage. This is saying I may be committed to you and we want to spend our lives together, but we've got to get some ducks in a row first, and that's exactly where your agreement
Right.
would come in, the contract would come in to play, the cohabitation contract.
And to your point, it does require a certain level of maturity and commitment, even under those circumstances, because it's a contract. I mean, you are bound by the terms that you agree to, and to sit down and go through all of that, you can very quickly understand whether exactly what's going on.
Well, and I think the interesting point is the data we have is on people that cohabit. What I would like to see is the results of people that have a cohabitation agreement. I'd be willing to bet if they go through that, they probably would stay together longer. I don't know what the data is, but it would seem like the intent and the focus and the commitment, the signing off on something like that might change those odds just a bit.
Well, we'll probably need to come back in like 10 or 20 years to take a look, because this is really the beginning of a trend, to formalize the relationship under these circumstances, more concretely, and that has not been the case in the past. So, Tobie, thank you so much for having a chat today.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
I appreciate all of your insights. If you'd like more information about marriage or divorce, go to lovemoneylaw.com, and you'll find more about videos, podcasts, webinars, and seminars. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Cindy Hyde.